I was halfway to the podium when I heard a chair scrape behind me, sharp enough to cut straight through the music and applause. It was my graduation day, the day I had stayed up countless nights for, the day I thought nothing and no one could ruin, but I should have known better. Trouble, in my life, always came wearing my sister's voice. I turned slightly, not enough to make a scene, just enough to see what had frozen the entire auditorium. And there she was, Madison, my older sister, my childhood shadow and my adult nightmare. She was standing now, her chin lifted like she had rehearsed this moment more times than I had rehearsed my capstone presentation. Her arm extended toward me, her finger aimed like a weapon. She cheated her way through college. Her words dropped into the room like a stone into still water, and the ripples hit every face in the audience. Hundreds of heads turned toward me, phones were raised, people whispered to each other, searching for meaning in the sudden crack in the celebration. I felt the air shift, as if the entire world had tilted, and I was the only one sliding toward the edge. But here is the part I want you to really hear, and maybe the reason you are still listening. I did not flinch, I did not shake, I did not break into pieces the way Madison hoped I would, because by the time she stood up to destroy me, I already knew the truth. I also knew she had no idea what I had been preparing for her. Before I tell you what happened next, let me give you the hook that defines everything you are about to hear. The day she tried to expose me was the day she accidentally exposed herself. My name is Emily Carter. I am 23 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that loving someone meant protecting them, even if it cost you something. But graduation morning taught me something else. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop protecting the person who is hurting you. While Madison stood there breathing hard, painting herself as the brave truth-teller, I kept walking down the aisle toward the stage. Every step felt like stepping deeper into a story I did not write, but could finally control. My robe brushed against my ankles, the lights warmed the top of my head, the whispers followed me like a slow-moving wave. But inside, I was steady. You might think that is cold, that I should have cried or defended myself or begged the crowd to understand me, but you have to know the history to understand the calm. Madison had spent months building to this moment. She thought today would be her victory lap. She thought everyone would believe her. She thought I would be defenseless. She thought wrong. As I reached the front row, a little girl sitting beside her mother grabbed her mom's sleeve and whispered something. Her mother shushed her gently, but kept her gaze locked on Madison, not on me. Strange how quickly a room can figure out who the real problem is when you stop reacting to the chaos. The dean was standing at the podium waiting for me, his expression unreadable, but his presence steady. We had spoken the night before. He knew more than Madison realized. He knew that the truth had a weight that would settle soon. But for the moment, he remained still, letting the spectacle burn itself out behind me. "Emily Carter," he announced. My name sounded louder than the accusations. I stepped onto the stage. I lifted my chin. I did not look back at Madison because I did not need to. When someone is determined to destroy themselves, you do not have to supervise the process. And maybe you are wondering what makes a sister do something like this. What breaks inside a person to make them aim all of their bitterness at you? I asked myself that for years. But harassment teaches you something painful and clear. Jealousy grows quietly for a long time before it shows its teeth. The dean reached for my diploma. My fingers brushed the edge of the leather folder. All around us, the audience held its breath. I leaned in just slightly, speaking softly enough that only he could hear. "Check under seat B17 after the ceremony." He gave the smallest nod. That was all we needed. Behind us, the noise continued. Madison shouting, faculty trying to calm her, people recording the scene as if it were part of the ceremony. But none of it mattered now. The hook of this entire story had already been set in motion. She tried to take my future in front of a crowd, unaware that I had brought the evidence that would take hers. I stepped off the stage and felt something I had not felt in months. Direction. Steadiness. A sense that the moment she chose to tear me apart was the exact moment everything would begin to fall back into place. If you were standing in that room with me, watching my sister unravel, what would you have done? And more importantly, what would you do if the person trying to destroy you was someone you once loved? Would you stay silent? Or would you finally let the truth speak? Because on that day, I chose the truth, and it chose me back. When I walked off that graduation stage, the applause behind me sounded strange, almost hollow, like it belonged to someone else's life. Maybe that is why my mind slipped backward, reaching for the beginning of all this. Because what happened in that auditorium did not start with Madison's accusation. It started years before, long before either of us knew how dangerous jealousy could become. I grew up in a house where love was measured by volume. Whoever laughed the loudest, talked the most, shined the brightest, got the attention. And that person was never me. It was always Madison. My sister was the kind of child relatives bragged about before they even said hello. She walked into rooms like a sparkler on the 4th of July, all light and noise and effortless charm. I used to watch her from the doorway, trying to figure out how to exist the way she did, how to make people lean in, how to make them stay. But my mother used to pat my shoulder and say, in a voice meant to be comforting, "You don't have to be like her, Emily," as if different meant lesser, as if quiet meant invisible. And maybe she was right, because no one noticed when quiet started turning into small, when small turned into shrinking, when shrinking turned into disappearing. I became the child teachers forgot to call on, the one relatives greeted with, "Oh, I didn't see you there." But Madison saw me, she always saw me. Jealousy is not born in silence, it grows there. I remember the night I realized the shift had begun. I was 16, sitting at the kitchen table studying for a chemistry exam. Madison walked in, hair curled, makeup flawless, glowing from some high school event. She dropped her purse onto the table, scattering my flashcards like confetti. "You're always studying," she said with a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "Does it even make you happy?" I thought she was joking. I shrugged. "It helps me keep up." Her smile tightened just enough to reveal the truth. "Right, keeping up." For years I told myself she did not mean it that way. But looking back, everything changed around that time. My grades climbed, hers slipped, teachers praised me more. She heard it all, and the more I grew into myself, the more she acted as if I were stealing something from her. Attention, praise, identity. There is a certain kind of fear that grows inside someone who has always believed the world belongs to them. When they start losing things they never earned, they look for someone to blame. And Madison chose me. I should have seen it earlier. But when you grow up loving someone, you learn how to excuse their sharpest edges. You tell yourself the cuts are accidents. By the time I left for college, the distance between us was a canyon. I remember standing in the doorway with my suitcase, heart pounding with the mix of fear and hope every 18-year-old feels. Madison leaned against the banister, arms crossed. "Good luck," she said. "Try not to burn out." Not congratulations, not "I'm proud of you," just a warning dressed as advice. I carried those words with me into every dorm room, every late-night study session, every exam hall. And in the beginning, college was exactly what I needed, a place where no one knew me as Madison's sister, a place where my voice did not get drowned out. But back home, Madison's life began collapsing. She dropped out of her graduate program. She moved back into her old bedroom. And for someone who lived off admiration, returning home was not just a setback, it was humiliation. That is when the small, strange things began. A scholarship refund missing a portion of money, an email from the financial aid office claiming I had withdrawn forms I never touched, a tutoring appointment mysteriously canceled, my student account flagging suspicious activity and locking me out for hours. Each incident felt like a pebble tossed into my life, small enough to ignore, but heavy enough to make ripples. I kept telling myself it was normal. Bureaucratic mistakes, system glitches, college chaos, anything but what my gut already knew. But denial is loud only until the truth whispers something undeniable. I still remember the night I sat on the dorm floor, staring at my laptop as it displayed the third login failure that week. My roommate Claire looked over, concern pulling her brows together. "You're checking your phone like you're waiting for something bad," she said softly. I didn't know how to explain that I wasn't waiting for bad news. I was waiting for a pattern, and whether I admitted it or not, I suspected exactly who was holding the thread. But here's the hook you need to follow me into the next part of this story. Pain does not begin the day someone hurts you. It begins the day you finally stop pretending they won't. And that day was coming for me much faster than I realized. Because the moment I uncovered the truth about who was behind everything was the moment the person I feared losing became the person I needed to protect myself from. And nothing in my life would ever be the same again. If I had paid closer attention, I would have seen the jealousy long before it learned how to speak. It lived in the quiet looks Madison gave me when I talked about school. It lived in the tight curve of her smile when someone compared us. It lived in the way she always needed the room to tilt her direction. But jealousy is clever. It does not show its teeth until you stop shrinking. After I left for college, I thought the distance would soften everything between us. I thought she would find her own path, her own place to shine. But instead, the world she built for herself began collapsing faster than anyone expected. She dropped out of her graduate program. One semester became a leave of absence. A leave of absence became moving back home. And moving back home became the worst thing that could happen to someone who believed she was born for bigger audiences. My parents tried to hide it from me. They acted like Madison was just taking a break. But every time I visited, the truth leaked through the cracks. The boxes of unpacked books, the resumes scattered across the dining table, the way my mother's voice went soft every time she said, "Madison just needs time." Time, in my family, is another word for denial. Meanwhile, my life was moving forward. I was earning grades I had worked for, building relationships that finally felt healthy, and discovering corners of myself that had never been allowed to breathe. Every success felt like proof that I was becoming someone outside the boundaries Madison had always drawn around me. But growth, when you come from a family like mine, is not a neutral thing. It is a threat. The calls from home started changing first. Shorter, tense. My mom would say things like, "Madison is under a lot of pressure right now. Try not to talk too much about school," or, "She feels left behind. Be patient with her." As if my happiness was a weapon. As if my achievements were designed to hurt her. And slowly, I stopped sharing things. I learned to dim my excitement, so she would not feel small next to it. I laughed lighter. I spoke softer. I carried my joy the way you carry glass across a crowded room, terrified someone will bump into you and blame you for the break. But shrinking only feeds the monster. It does not tame it. The first time I realized Madison was watching me more closely than she should have been was the night she commented on a detail I had never posted anywhere of a scholarship I received, and when I received it down to the exact date, she said it casually, like gossip she had heard. But there was no way she could have known. Not unless she had gone looking. Not unless she had already stepped into parts of my life she was not meant to enter. Still, I brushed it off. You learn to do that when the alternative is admitting something too painful to face. You tell yourself she was guessing. You tell yourself it was coincidence. You tell yourself this is family. She would never go that far. But I was wrong. The jealousy did not stay inside her. It grew legs. It learned how to move. The first missing scholarship refund was easy to explain. Accounting error, they said. Happens every year, they said. Then the second adjustment happened. Not enough to bankrupt me, just enough to make me feel unsteady. Then came the accusations. Little ones. A so-called tutoring complaint, a supposed missed appointment with a professor I had never scheduled, a plagiarism flag on an assignment I had triple-checked. Each incident on its own was small enough to dismiss, but together, they formed a pattern. A pattern with my name on the receiving end and someone else's fingerprints on the sending end. My roommate Claire noticed the shift before I said anything. She would catch me staring at my phone long after midnight, waiting for the next thing to go wrong. "You look like you're bracing for impact," she whispered one night. I didn't answer. Because she was right. I felt like someone was tightening invisible ropes around my life. Not enough to strangle me, just enough to remind me they could. But the moment that carved itself into my chest happened one rainy afternoon during my sophomore year. I was walking across campus when I saw Madison's name pop up on my lock screen. A text. "Proud of you, Em. Sorry I haven't said it in a while." For a heartbeat, I believed it. I wanted to believe it. That maybe she was trying. That maybe we could repair whatever had cracked. But an hour later, my campus email notified me of a withdrawn application form. One I had never touched. One withdrawn exactly 30 minutes after her message. That was the moment I learned jealousy can wear kindness like a mask. And kindness is easiest to fake when you want someone to let their guard down. I did not tell anyone. Not Claire. Not my parents, not even myself, if I am being honest. Because saying it out loud would make it real, and real was terrifying. But here is the hook you need to follow me into the next chapter. The moment you start questioning someone you love is the moment you begin seeing the truth they have been hiding from you. and the truth was about to show itself in a way I could no longer ignore. Because jealousy had stopped being a feeling, it had become a plan, and I was the target. Once I admitted to myself that something was wrong, the world didn't collapse all at once. It tilted slowly, almost politely, as if trying to give me time to adjust before it dropped me completely. But sabotage is never loud in the beginning. It always whispers first. And the first whisper came the following week. I was sitting in the campus library, the kind of afternoon where the sun lit the table in soft gold, where everything should have felt peaceful. I had a small stack of articles printed out for my behavioral neuroscience class, a coffee that had already gone cold, and the vague sense that maybe, finally, things were stabilizing. Then my phone buzzed. Your recent tutoring violation has been recorded. Repeat incidents may affect your academic standing. I stared at the message so long the words blurred. Violation, repeat, academic standing. My brain couldn't make the pieces fit. I didn't tutor anyone that week. I barely had time to sleep, let alone break rules I'd never even heard of. I walked straight to the tutoring center, the printed notice shaking slightly in my hand. The woman at the front desk scanned the form, looked at her computer, and frowned. It says you canceled 3 appointments without notice. 3 appointments. I didn't book a single one. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. My voice didn't feel like mine when I finally said, quietly, "That isn't possible." She shrugged the way people shrug when the problem isn't theirs to solve. "You should check with your professor. It's your responsibility." Responsibility. Another word that felt like accusation. I left the center numb, as if the ground under me had turned into something I couldn't trust. When I got back to the dorm, Claire looked up from her laptop. "Everything okay?" "No." And the worst part was, I didn't know how to explain why. The next morning, things escalated. My student portal refused to log me in. "Incorrect password," it said. I reset it. 15 minutes later, it locked again. Then I received an email, confirming that I had withdrawn from my capstone advising meeting, the one I had been preparing for all month. The message wasn't written in my tone. The phrasing felt off. Too formal, too stiff. It didn't sound like me, but it came from my email address. That was the moment my fear stopped being abstract. Someone wasn't just messing with school systems or random paperwork. Someone was impersonating me. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands pressed into my knees, breathing through a rising panic that felt older than the moment. It felt like childhood, like the years I spent being erased in small, quiet ways, like the softness I learned to carry so no one else would feel uncomfortable. My phone buzzed again. "Professor Hale would like to discuss your plagiarism concern." Plagiarism. The room spun. I walked to his office in a daze. The hallway felt longer than usual, like my feet were wading through memories I had tried hard to bury. When he opened the door, his expression wasn't angry. It was concerned. "Emily, sit down." He folded his hands gently, like he was holding something fragile between them. "A complaint came through from a faculty assistant. It alleges that sections of your behavioral report were not original." My report, the one I wrote alone in the quiet hours of early morning, the one I edited 9 times, the one I poured my pride into. I felt heat rush to my face. I didn't plagiarize anything. "I know," he said calmly. "That's why I'm telling you now, so you can prepare if this continues." If this continues, the implication cut deeper than the accusation. He believed me, but he also believed something was happening. Not a mistake, not a glitch, a pattern. When I stepped out of his office, Evan from my freshman lab group passed me in the hall. He gave me a look like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure what side of the story I belonged on. That look stayed with me all day. By evening, I stopped refreshing my inbox. I stopped checking notifications. I stopped expecting the next thing to be benign. I sat on my bed staring at the blank wall, trying to map out all the little pieces that no longer felt random. The tutoring complaints, the withdrawn refunds, the login failures, the appointment cancellations, the plagiarism flag. 5 separate incidents, 5 different departments on campus, but all affecting only one person, me. I felt something cold move through my chest. Not fear, recognition. Someone was inside my life. Someone who knew my schedules, my habits, my weaknesses. Someone who wanted to collapse everything I had built, one small shove at a time. And deep down, in the part of myself I had been trying not to listen to, I already knew who that someone was. I just wasn't ready to say her name. Not yet. Because the moment I said it out loud was the moment I would have to face what she had become. And once you face a truth like that, you can never unsee it. Before you go to the next part with me, let me ask you something. If you started seeing your life fall apart piece by piece, who is the first person you would suspect, and more importantly, who is the last person you would want to suspect? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes, your answers say more about your past than you realize. For weeks, I told myself the same lie over and over. This was all just a series of technical glitches and unfortunate timing, a bureaucratic mess, a misunderstanding, anything except the thing my gut kept whispering in the back of my mind. But denial is a fragile shelter. All it takes is one crack for everything to come flooding in. That crack came on a Tuesday night. It was late, the kind of late when campus goes quiet except for the distant hum of vending machines. Claire had fallen asleep on her side of the dorm, one arm hanging off the bed, her breathing soft and even. I should have been sleeping too. Instead, I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, hunting through old emails to prepare for my capstone review, and then I saw it. An email in my sent folder that I did not send. The subject line read, "Canceling tomorrow's meeting." My heart thudded once, then again, harder. I clicked. "Professor Hale, unfortunately, I need to cancel our capstone discussion. I will reach out when I am able to reschedule. Thank you for your understanding." It didn't sound like me. It didn't read like me. The punctuation was wrong. The sign-off was wrong. Even the tone felt foreign, like someone trying to write in a voice they didn't fully understand. But someone had used my account. Someone had pretended to be me. Someone had decided for me which doors I was allowed to walk through. The longer I stared at the screen, the warmer my face felt, as if shame and fury were fighting for space under my skin. Part of me wanted to wake Claire, shove the laptop into her hands, and beg her to tell me I was imagining things, but the truth was too sharp now. Too loud. I pressed my palms to the floor, grounding myself in something solid. This was intentional. And intentional meant personal. I scrolled through the login history again, praying for a glitch or a timestamp that didn't make sense. Instead, I saw something worse. The logins from earlier that week came from a device that wasn't mine, and the IP address wasn't from campus. It was from Portland, home. At first, all I felt was confusion. Then the confusion twisted, thinned, and shaped itself into an answer I didn't want. Madison had been at home for months. She had access to my old devices. She knew my security questions, because we grew up telling each other everything. She had heard my passwords before in passing, laughing as she teased me for reusing the same ones. Every piece clicked into place. The timing, the tone of the messages, the strange knowledge she had about my scholarship, the sudden kindness in her texts right before something went wrong. It was her. It had been her for a long time. I swallowed hard, like my body was trying to keep the truth from spilling out. Why would she do this was the first question that rose in my chest. But it was the wrong question. The real question was much simpler. How long had she been planning this? Because sabotage like this doesn't start on impulse. It grows slowly, like a shadow that learns how to stretch. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. For the first time since everything began, I let myself consider the possibility that my sister wasn't just jealous or insecure. She wanted my life to fall apart. She wanted me to fail. She wanted what she had always demanded, without saying it out loud, for the world to stay tilted in her direction. My breathing grew shaky, and I took a moment before I whispered into the still dorm room, more to myself than anything. "Why me, Madison? Why now?" No answer came back, but silence can be its own response, and this silence felt like betrayal. The next day, I drove home. I told myself it was to clear my head, to get space, to see my parents. But really, I think I wanted to look at Madison and see something in her face that told me I was wrong, something that said I had misunderstood everything. When I walked into the house, my dad was fixing a loose hinge on the coat closet. He smiled tiredly, the kind of smile people use when they want to hide heavier things. "Hey Em, everything all right?" I hesitated, then said, "Dad, has Madison ever said anything about me? About school?" He paused for a moment too long. "She's been tense," he admitted. "Said you get everything handed to you." I told her that wasn't fair, but She's struggling. It's been a hard year. Struggling did not explain sabotage. Hard year did not explain impersonation. But I nodded anyway, because sometimes you protect the people you love, even when they wouldn't do the same for you. I left without confronting her. Not yet. I needed proof. Real proof. Something undeniable. Because once you accuse someone you love of betraying you, there is no going back. That night, lying in my bed back on campus, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done guessing, done hoping, done shrinking myself to avoid the truth. If someone was inside my life, tearing down everything I built, then I was going to find them. And when I did, I would force the truth into the light, where even Madison couldn't twist it. Before we move to the next chapter, tell me something. Have you ever realized someone close to you was working against you, and you saw it too late? If this part resonated with you, tap like to help this story reach someone who needs it. Because the next chapter is the one where everything finally breaks open. Once the idea took root that Madison might be behind the chaos unraveling my life, I couldn't sleep. Not a real sleep, just long stretches of lying awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my phone to buzz with the next disaster. It felt like living with a ghost who knew exactly where I hid my fears and how to tap them awake. By the third night, I'd had enough. I didn't want to wonder anymore. I didn't want to guess. I didn't want to keep spiraling between guilt and denial, hoping my own sister wasn't capable of what the evidence kept pointing toward. I needed the truth. And the truth, as it turned out, required a specialist. His name was Ethan Rourke, a cybersecurity analyst 2 years older than me, with a reputation for finding digital footprints no one else could. Claire's friend knew him and gave me his number with a hesitant look, like she wasn't sure I would want the answers he was capable of finding. I texted him the same night. He responded within 5 minutes. "Come by tomorrow. Bring everything you've got. Everything you've got." I didn't have much, just screenshots and a sinking feeling that had been building for months. But I gathered every email, every notification, every flagged message. I printed login alerts and tutoring violations. I wrote down dates, times, the exact moments my life started bending in directions I didn't push it. The next day, I met him at a shared workspace downtown, the kind filled with 2 bright light bulbs and people who lived on caffeine and deadlines. Ethan didn't greet me with small talk. He saw the stack of papers in my hand and said simply, "Sit." I sat. "Tell me everything." And for the first time since all of this began, I did. I told him about the missing scholarship money, the fake tutoring violations, the email cancellations, the login lockouts, and the plagiarism accusation. I told him how each incident felt disconnected until they suddenly weren't. I told him about the sent email I didn't write. And I told him about Madison. When I finished, he didn't react with shock or pity. He just nodded, opened his laptop, and began typing. "If someone's been in your accounts," he said, "they left footprints. People always leave footprints." His confidence made my lungs loosen for the first time in weeks. He asked for my consent to access the metadata logs. I agreed. He asked for approximate dates where things went wrong. I listed them slowly, trying not to shake. He imported the logs, opened a map of IP connections, and began tracing patterns. Then, after maybe 20 minutes, he leaned back. "Here." The word wasn't loud, but it hit like a hammer. He pointed to a login entry. "This isn't your device." My throat tightened. "Is it campus Wi-Fi?" "No. This one's from a home network. Portland." "Home." He clicked again. And again. 3 more logins, all from the same IP cluster, all within weeks of each other. I stared at them as if staring could make them morph into something less painful. He scrolled further. "These scholarship refunds you were missing." He opened a list of transactions tied to my student account. Someone rerouted them twice, not the school. A third-party user. My stomach dropped. He clicked into another folder. "And these tutoring complaints? They were submitted from an email 1 character off from yours. Very intentional." Intentional. That word carved itself into me like fresh ice. He wasn't done. "There's more." He opened a split screen, showing 2 digital signatures. One belonged to me. The other, almost identical, belonged to someone else mimicking my writing patterns. "This is someone who knows you," Ethan said. "Someone with access to your personal information. Someone who either guessed your security questions or remembered them." I felt myself folding inward. Because only one person had that level of access. Only one person knew my passwords from years of sharing computers. Only one person had been home long enough to do it. Only one person showed the same resentment I saw in these patterns. Madison. I didn't say her name out loud. Ethan didn't ask it. He didn't need to. He closed the laptop gently, the way someone closes a casket. "You're being targeted," he said. "And whoever is doing this has been doing it for months." The room felt small suddenly, too warm, too bright. My hands trembled in my lap, but my face stayed still. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry. The emotion that washed over me was something quieter and colder. Recognition. Everything made sense now. The strangely timed texts, the too specific comments, the fake support followed by sudden complications, the way every setback seemed perfectly placed, perfectly timed, perfectly designed to collapse my stability without outright destroying me. It wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, and worse, it was personal. I left the workspace and sat in my car for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel the way you grip something to keep from falling apart. It's a strange thing, realizing the person who should have protected you was the one pulling you apart thread by thread. But here's the part I keep returning to, the part that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. She didn't want to ruin my grades. She wanted to ruin me. Before I went back to campus, I asked myself the one question that would shape everything that came next. If someone you love tries to destroy your future, do you protect them from the consequences or protect yourself from them? And that is the question I want you to discuss. Because some of you will say family deserves forgiveness, others will say betrayal deserves consequences. So tell me, honestly, what would you do? I drove back to campus from Ethan's office in complete silence, not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that makes the air feel too thick, too still, like it's waiting for you to catch up with the truth you finally stopped running from. Madison did this. The sister who braided my hair before the first day of school, the sister who held my hand when I was scared of thunderstorms, the sister I once would have defended to the ends of the earth. She was the one tightening the noose around my life. But as I parked outside my dorm, another realization settled in my chest like a cold, steady stone. If she had planned all of this for months, then her confidence made sense. She thought she had already won. She thought she had hidden well. She thought I would drown quietly. She didn't know I was done drowning. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Sharp, focused, strangely calm. It wasn't anger. Anger is messy, unpredictable. What I felt was something more dangerous. Resolve. I gathered every screenshot Ethan had sent, every printout I'd saved, every timestamp he highlighted. I placed them in a folder so thick the edges didn't close. Then I walked across campus to the law building, climbed 3 flights of stairs, and knocked on the office door of someone Claire's cousin had recommended. Rachel Kim, attorney. Sharp-eyed, soft-spoken, ruthless when necessary. She opened the door, looked at the folder in my hands, then at the exhaustion on my face. "You're Emily, right? Come in." Her office smelled like coffee and paper. Not the warm kind of coffee, the kind that meant long nights and unfinished battles. She gestured for me to sit across from her. "Tell me what brought you here." So I did. I told her everything from the missing scholarship payments, to the impersonated emails, to the network logs pointing directly to my parents' home. I told her about the tutoring violations, the plagiarism complaint, the cancellations, and the slow unraveling of my reputation. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead, I spoke with a steadiness that surprised even me. Maybe because I had spent months being shaken, and there was nothing left in me that could break further. When I finished, Rachel leaned back, her eyes scanning the evidence again. "Emily, this isn't simple harassment. This is coordinated, calculated." She looked up, eyebrows drawn. "This is academic sabotage. Identity interference, maybe even fraud." My throat tightened, but not from fear this time. "What do I do?" Rachel tapped a pen against her notebook thoughtfully. "First, we gather everything. Every detail, every login, every violation notice. We prepare a timeline. Then we file a preliminary statement with the university. After that, we consider civil action." Civil action. Against my sister. A part of me recoiled, instinctively protective of the girl I used to love. But another part, the part Madison kept crushing over and over, lifted its head. She chose this. Rachel folded her hands. Before anything happens, you need to ask yourself one thing. When do you want this to stop? The question hovered between us, unsettling and honest. When she can't hurt me anymore, I finally said. Rachel nodded once, decisive. Then we start today. For the next hour, she helped me organize everything. She walked me step by step through the foundation of a case. She was calm where I had been frantic, methodical where I had been overwhelmed, and with every piece of evidence we labeled, something inside me shifted. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't waiting for the next blow. I was preparing for the end of it. By noon, she handed me a document to review a draft of my statement. Once this is filed, she said, things will move quickly. Are you ready for that? Ready. The word felt too small for what was coming, but I nodded, because sometimes you don't wait to feel ready. Sometimes you act because the alternative is losing yourself entirely. As I left her office, the sunlight outside felt different. Not brighter, sharper, like the world hadn't changed, but I finally saw it clearly. Madison thought she was still in control. She thought all her moves were hidden. She thought graduation would be her final blow. But graduation had just become the stage where her entire plan would collapse. On the walk back to my dorm, my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. Madison's been emotional lately. Please be patient with her. I stared at the message so long the screen dimmed. Emotional wasn't the word. Not anymore. And patience was something I no longer owed to someone trying to erase me. I closed my phone and kept walking. Because the truth was no longer a secret. And secrets lose their power the moment you stop protecting them. Before we move to the next part, I want you to think about this. If someone in your family crossed a line so deeply that it threatened your future, would you confront them privately or let the truth unravel publicly? Tell me what you would choose, and why. Because where this story goes next is where everything snaps. Graduation morning didn't feel real at first. The sky was too blue, the air too still, the world too calm for what I knew was coming. I stood in front of the mirror in my dorm, adjusting the tassel on my cap, my fingers steady in a way they hadn't been for months. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was the moment the truth would finally stop hiding. Rachel had filed the preliminary statement the night before. Ethan had finalized the digital report. The evidence was stacked, organized, and undeniable. The dean already knew. The academic board already had a meeting scheduled. Everything was in motion, and Madison had no idea. As I walked across campus toward the auditorium, the weight inside me wasn't fear anymore. It was preparation, a kind of stillness that comes when you know exactly who you are and exactly what the truth will do once it reaches the light. But the moment I saw my family standing near the entrance, that stillness cracked just a little. My mother smiled too brightly. My father hugged me too tightly. And Madison watched me with an expression I recognized immediately. Hunger, expectation, the confidence of someone who believed she was about to deliver the final blow. She didn't come to celebrate me. She came to end me. She had no idea she was walking straight into her own ending. I took my seat on the stage among the honors students. From up there, the crowd looked endless. Faces blurred into a sea of color. Programs fluttered in hands like nervous wings. Faculty lined the rows behind the podium. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. The air felt charged, like the moments before a storm. The ceremony began. Speeches, applause, the choir singing a song I had heard a dozen times but never really listened to. Names being called, one by one, each step echoing slightly on the wooden stage. And then, it happened. A scraping sound. Sharp, jarring, loud enough to slice through the ceremony. Madison's chair. She stood up so abruptly several people flinched. And then she raised her arm and pointed straight at me. She cheated her way through college. The words tore through the auditorium like fabric ripping. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Gasps rose like a wave. Phones lifted instantly, eager to capture the spectacle she had orchestrated. And Madison, soaking in the attention, kept going. She lied. She manipulated the system. She doesn't deserve that diploma. Her voice shook with emotion, but not truth. I had spent enough years hearing the difference. For a single second, the world held its breath, waiting for me to crumble, but I didn't. I stood. My robe brushed my ankles as I walked forward, my steps slow and deliberate, as if each one were a quiet refusal to bow to her chaos. I didn't look at her. She wasn't the point of this moment. The truth was, and the truth was waiting under seat B17 in a sealed envelope Rachel and I had prepared. When I reached the podium, the dean met my eyes. His expression was calm, steady, knowing. "Emily Carter," he announced. My name rang louder than Madison's accusations. I stepped toward him, accepted my diploma with a firm grip, leaned in just slightly, and whispered, "It's under B17. He nodded once. No surprise, no hesitation. That nod was the quiet strike that would start unraveling everything Madison had built. Behind us, the energy in the auditorium shifted, subtle, but real. A woman in the front row lowered her phone, her eyebrows knitted. A professor whispered to another, shaking his head. A student muttered something like, "That didn't look like someone guilty." Even the crowd sensed it, the imbalance, the performance, the desperation radiating off Madison as she kept shouting accusations no one was asking for anymore. Security moved toward her row, not aggressive, not dramatic, just the slow, inevitable movement of an ending finding its way to the person who caused it. Madison's voice cracked as she tried one last time to claw the attention back to herself. "You all saw it," she screamed. "She didn't deny anything. She just stood there. That's guilt." But no one believed her anymore. They had seen the way I walked, calm, grounded, unbroken. They had seen the dean's nod. They had seen the evidence of her unraveling, not mine. Security reached her. "Ma'am, please step outside." She jerked her arm away. "Don't you dare touch me. She's the liar. She's the fraud, not me." Her makeup streaked. Her voice wavered. Her body shook with rage she didn't understand how to contain. And as she fought against the people trying to guide her out, something in her eyes flickered panic. The moment a performer realizes the audience is no longer on their side, the moment the mask slips, she stumbled toward the exit, her voice collapsing into raw, incoherent shouting. When she reached the doors, she twisted back toward me, eyes wild. "This isn't over, Emily." But she was wrong. This was the beginning of the end. Not for me. For her. And before we go on, I want you to think about this. If someone publicly tried to destroy you the way Madison tried to destroy me, would you stay silent and let the truth speak? Or would you fight back right there on the spot? Tell me what you would have done, because how you answer says a lot about who you are. When security escorted Madison out of the graduation hall, her screams still echoed behind me like a fading storm. I didn't chase after her. I didn't even turn around. For the first time in years, I felt what silence could sound like: steady, grounding, powerful. My hands weren't trembling. My breath was calm. The humiliation she planned for me had become her undoing instead. But public collapse was only the beginning. The real reckoning would happen the next morning. After the ceremony, the university officials led by President Harrington took the envelope I had placed under seat B17. I saw the way their eyes flicked over the documents, confusion turning to tension, then to controlled, professional shock. They didn't say much to me, but they didn't have to. One administrator placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Go home, Emily. We'll handle the rest." For the first time in years, someone in authority believed me without hesitation. I walked out of the auditorium with my diploma in one hand, and a lifetime of weight finally slipping off my spine. Madison's meltdown spread across campus faster than wildfire. Students whispered, professors talked in hushed clusters, and someone even uploaded a blurry clip of security dragging her out. The comments ranged from confusion to disbelief. But none of them knew the truth yet, not until the investigation began. Early the next morning, I received an email requesting my presence at the Academic Integrity Office. When I arrived, 3 administrators were already waiting with folders, laptops, and 2 additional IT staff. They didn't question whether I was telling the truth. They were building the timeline. Ethan had already sent them his digital forensic report. Unauthorized logins, IP matches to my parents' home, timestamp logs lining up with Madison's devices, metadata proving emails had been spoofed. Then came the financial records. The lost scholarship funds had been quietly redirected to a prepaid card purchased under Madison's name. It wasn't just sabotage. It was identity fraud, financial manipulation, academic tampering. By noon, the university had made its decision. "Emily," the lead investigator said gently, "We're opening a formal case. We'll be contacting your family." I exhaled, long and tired. All those nights I'd cried alone, believing maybe I truly was the problem, suddenly felt like memories belonging to someone else. Later that evening, my parents called. I stared at their names on my screen for almost a full minute before answering. Dad's voice was tight. Mom sounded shaken. "Emily, why didn't you tell us?" Mom asked. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. For years, any attempt I made to speak up was brushed aside as jealousy, misunderstanding, or my personal favorite, "Madison just needs more reassurance than you do." But now reality had slapped them hard enough to finally wake them. "Because," I said steadily, "you weren't listening." Silence. A strange, heavy silence I'd never heard from them before. "We didn't know it was this bad," Dad whispered. "No," I replied. "You didn't want to know." They didn't argue. They couldn't. The university had already sent them the preliminary findings. Forged emails. Manipulated financial records. Academic sabotage. Digital evidence linking everything to Madison. Their golden daughter had left fingerprints everywhere. When my father finally spoke again, his voice cracked. "Your sister, she needs help." I didn't argue with that, but help wasn't the same as protection, and for the first time, they understood the difference. Within 5 days, the university imposed sanctions, immediate ban from campus, pending civil charges, financial restitution for scholarship interference, mandatory hearing with the university's legal team, and the part that hit her hardest, every job application she'd ever hoped to submit would carry a permanent mark of academic interference. I didn't rejoice, but I didn't pity her, either. Actions have consequences. She just never believed they'd come for her. Mom tried to soften the blow when she called again. "Emily, your sister is devastated." "She devastated herself," I replied. "I just stopped covering the damage." And maybe for the first time in her life, Madison felt what it was like to stand in the ruins she created. Walking through campus a week later, people smiled at me, nodded at me, treated me like someone who survived something heavy and somehow walked out taller. One professor stopped me outside the library. "Emily, for what it's worth, we're proud of the way you handled yourself." I thanked him, but what I wanted to say was this: strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet decision to stop being someone's victim. My story didn't end with Madison's downfall. It began the moment I chose to tell the truth, even when the truth was painful. If you've ever had a family member who thought they could outsmart everyone but forgot how Wi-Fi works, drop a smiley icon in the comments. When the investigation into Madison finally wrapped, I expected to feel victorious, relieved, vindicated. Something big and cinematic, like the emotional equivalent of fireworks exploding over a night sky. But the truth was quieter than that. I sat alone on the edge of my bed, the night everything became official, my name cleared, Madison sanctioned, my academic record fully restored, and I realized something surprising. I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about me for the first time in a long time. For years, my life had been shaped by trying not to upset Madison, trying not to disappoint my parents, trying not to be the person they saw as quiet, sensitive, or easy to push around. But with the truth finally out, the emptiness left behind wasn't scary. It was space. New space. My space. And I intended to fill it with something better. I moved 2 months later, heading north with everything I owned packed into a single car. Oregon felt like the kind of place where no one knew my past, my family, or the chaos trailing behind me. My new apartment overlooked a row of pine trees that swayed like they were whispering, "You're safe here." No yelling, no accusations, no waiting for someone to sabotage my day, just stillness. I adopted a rescue dog named Milo, half golden retriever, half chaos, full heart. He followed me everywhere, including the kitchen, where he seemed convinced that gravity was invented specifically for him to catch falling snacks. It was ridiculous and perfect. For the first time, my home felt like mine. Healing is strange. No one tells you how uncomfortable it can be when your whole identity suddenly shifts from surviving someone else to building yourself. End quote. In those early weeks, I had moments where I reached for my phone, expecting another crisis, another fake email, another sabotage attempt. Another meltdown from my sister, but the notifications stayed quiet, and the quiet finally stopped feeling like a threat. My parents called occasionally. Their voices were softer now, less certain, less dismissive, more aware of their part in the damage. They apologized more than once. I didn't know how to respond, but I learned it was okay not to have an answer yet. Forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a door, and sometimes you need time before you decide whether you want to open it. As for Madison, I didn't hear from her again. Not a call, not a text, not a single digital footprint. Part of me wondered if she expected an apology from me, as twisted as that sounds. Another part wondered if she was finally facing consequences she couldn't charm her way out of. But I wasn't chasing her anymore. I had spent too many years losing myself while trying to understand her. This chapter was about reclaiming the parts of me she tried to erase. When I opened the acceptance email from the graduate program I dreamed about since freshman year, I didn't scream or jump around like in the movies. I just cried, quietly, the kind of tears that wash away things you didn't realize were still stuck to you. I sent the news to Ethan first. If anyone earned the right to celebrate with me, it was him. His reply came instantly, "Knew you'd do it, proud of you." Then I emailed Professor Langley, the woman who believed in me even when the rumors started. She sent a long message back, telling me she had always seen something special in me. For once, the praise didn't feel like pressure. It felt like a mirror reflecting who I could become. Months later, my graduate program invited me to speak at an orientation event about academic integrity. I almost said, no, public speaking was never my thing, but something inside nudged me forward. I told my story. Not the dramatic version you'd see online, and not the sanitized version families tell to avoid shame. The real version. The painful version. The human version. People listened, really listened. Some nodded, some teared up, some came up afterward to thank me for saying things they'd been too afraid to voice. That was the moment I understood what my story meant. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't exposure. It wasn't even vindication. It was freedom. Mine. And maybe, in some small way, theirs too. Years from now, people might remember the scandal, the investigation, the meltdown at graduation. But I hope I remember this part instead. Milo sleeping beside my desk, the smell of pine after a morning rain, coffee shops where no one knew my last name, evenings spent studying because I wanted to, not because I needed to outrun someone's lies. Peace is underrated until you finally have it. Then you wonder how you ever survived without it. If someone tries to erase you, don't waste your life shrinking smaller just to make them feel bigger. Tell the truth. Choose yourself. Step into the life they said you didn't deserve. Because the moment you stop fighting for their version of your story, you finally get to live your own. If my story touched something in you, if you've ever rebuilt yourself after someone tried to break you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. This community grows every time someone chooses courage over silence. And I'd love for you to be part of it.